While our kids are going out, let's get our Bibles open. We're going to be in Paul's letter to the Philippians today, the 4th chapter. I'm going to give you a good bit of context in a few minutes. So let's just read the passage and see what the Lord does for us. If you are using a Bible that's out here and you're in here in person, it's page 1181, chapter 4, beginning with the 4th verse. If you're using an electronic device or you're at home, I encourage you to use a New International Version simply because that's what I've got, and it's good just to have the same, the same basic wording. Listen for the word of the Lord. Rejoice in the Lord always. I'll say it again, rejoice. Let your gentleness be evident to all. The Lord is near. Don't be anxious about anything, but in every situation by prayer and petition with thanksgiving, present your requests to God. And the peace of God, which transcends all understanding, will guard your hearts and your minds in Christ Jesus. Finally, brothers and sisters, whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is right, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything is excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Whatever you have learned or received or heard from me or seen in me, put it into practice, and the God of peace will be with you. That's the word of the Lord. Outside of Columbia, South Carolina, and occasionally we would go into to the big city. And if you were, when I was a kid, if you were driving down Gervais Street, which is kind of the main thoroughfare, went right past the Capitol and all that. If you look to the right, if you were coming across the river, you went on down into town, you look to the right. When I was a kid, there was a big Esso service station that before it was Exxon, it had pumps, and then it had this massive car wash. It's like the only electronic, or no, it wasn't electronic, I guess, the only mechanical car wash in Columbia. And, back in the day when I had those big brushes that would just brush up each car. And so all of the downtown lawyers would wash their car have it go through every day. And it was just all these streak marks, all these, paint kind of taken off of it. But everybody knew they got their car washed there rather than washing it themselves. So it's really kind of the place. But the thing that made it most notable was not that it was just like a big place, you get your gas or whatever. But right in front was a cage that was about 4 by 8, and in it was a tiger. Happy the Tiger was his name. You remember the Esso slogans, for those of you who are of my generation, put a tiger in your tank, right? And the cage was so small really that it was hard for Happy to really turn around, so Happy kind of seemed to be seated in front, looking out on Gervais Street. Now, when I would be with my dad or my Uncle Albert, the same thing would come up. Just how inhumane that was, how sad that was, how unhappy Happy looked. And my dad was a long-distance truck driver. He put literally millions of miles on engines. He would never, ever buy his gas at Esso or his diesel or anything. There was just something about it that just spoke to these two men. So one day we're going down Gervais Street. I'm with my Uncle Albert. I think I'm about 8 years old. My Uncle Albert get in front of the Esso, look over, see unhappy the tiger. And my Uncle Albert said, "Jimmy, some people do the same thing." I said, "What?" He said, "There's a lot of people in cages." He paused for a minute and let it sink in for me, and he said, "Now some of them are put in cages. But you know the truth? Most men that are in cages put themselves in it themselves. And then they got really surprised when someone else locked them in." And we drove on off. I had no idea what he was talking about. But I remember it. Now, I bring that up because I think that the Apostle Paul is doing the exact same thing. He doesn't have a tiger in his tank. He doesn't have a tiger Happy that he's using as an illustration. But I think he's really saying the same thing. It's the same thought. This idea that that the truth of our life is that so many of us who feel as if we're trapped have crawled into that cage ourselves and then wonder why we got locked in. How did we get trapped by life? How did we get trapped by this situation? How do we get trapped by this agenda? Now, I say that because if you really look at the letter to the Philippians, and we use it a lot, it's got some of these great, like this one, like rejoice in the Lord always, I'll say it again, rejoice. I've got so many friends who say that's their life verse. It's great. And there's all these pithy statements that are in it. But let's just pause for a moment and think about Paul, Philippi, and the letter that he writes. So when the Apostle Paul is writing this letter, he's writing it to a church that he knows and loves, and he's in jail. He says that in the very first chapter. And we assume, though he's not explicit, but we assume it's his last imprisonment. And there's some reasons for that in the text to make us think that, which means he's in Rome and he's awaiting his execution. So he's in Rome awaiting his execution, and he writes a letter to a people that he loves, for whom he cares, and that he desires to encourage them. So that's Paul. Now, Philippi. Philippi's a city, we believe, probably 10 or 15,000 people, not huge, but overwhelmingly prominent. It's in what would, at that point, would be called Macedon, but it's really Macedonia, but it's up above, kind of above Athens. It's in Greece. It's about 10 miles in from the coast, so it's not a coastal city, but it is on what was called the Egyptian Way. This very, very prominent road and commerce and all kinds of prominent people all kind of came through that way. So it is a nice, really, really nice, influential, much more influential beyond its size city. And it is populated, interestingly enough, with a huge number of retired military. Like Norfolk, right? But a huge number of retired military. Now, here's what happened, we think. They probably were billeted there at some point, or they came through because it's a prominent road, and they looked at it and said, this would be a nice place to live. Now, when you're a Roman soldier, if you do the right things in the Roman army, you qualify to become a Roman citizen. That's sort of your retirement. If you do it all right, and you get all the box checked and everything, you go through all your promotion, all that stuff, you become a Roman citizen. Extremely rare. Very, very few Romans were actual Roman citizens. But there's a big disproportionate amount of Roman folks that are there in a Greek city, and out of those Roman folks that are there, a large number of Roman citizens. So when you're a Roman citizen, you've got it made. You've got everything's really taken care of for you. You can't even, the local authorities don't really even have much power over you. Paul, by coincidence, is a Roman citizen. That's how he's in Rome. Because when he is getting to be tried, where he was, he appeals to Caesar, and immediately they send any Roman citizen to Rome who appeals to Caesar. So important is it. So this is a great big deal, right? You got not just a good cushy retirement, but you have made it. And when you have made it, you start to then think about all the nationalism that's there. Starts as patriotism that really turns into nationalism. All that kind of stuff that's going on. All these kinds of things. Well, he's a citizen, he's not. All this is going on. So you start to see that you've got a really nice place to live, but you've got a lot of social division. Or let me say social ranking. Are we together? So when that happens, we start to recognize that then when you've got social ranking like this, and when you've got commerce that's starting to make some people more affluent than others, then you've got the haves and the have-nots, and you've got the people that are literally looking down. Well, I shouldn't say literally, but they're looking down because they're up at the top, and the others who aren't. And Paul's writing to a church that has both. And he's writing to a church, and he's saying to them, he said, now, I want you to recognize that there's some challenges for us in our lives. And this is not just in the letter to the Philippians. I mean, you see this Paul's theme throughout, is that it's going to be very tempting for us to allow a patriotism to become a nationalism and then to subvert the gospel. Or it's going to be very tempting to have this prominence, this wealth that you start to earn and make, and you're doing it for yourself, and you're earning it and making it yourself, but then it's going to be really tempting for you to start to think that you are better than the people that didn't do that. Or that you're secure in the things of the world, in the ranking of the world, in the income, in the things of the world. You're secure in that, and that starts to give you this sort of false confidence. And all of these things are going to be the things that are going to cause you to crawl into a cage. Because as my Uncle Albert would say, there are some people that are put in cages, but the most of men that are in them, the most of people that are in them, are people that went in themselves. One little crawl, one little paw print at a time, one little small thing, one another, until they wake up and realize that someone has locked them in. That's good stuff, isn't it? I mean, you start to think about that. It starts to bring Philippi alive. It starts to bring up some of the things that are going on in Paul's writing. Here's another component that Paul brings up immediately, right before this, actually. Paul is talking about the sense that we're going to have problems in church, too. So we're going to have arguments in church. We're going to have situations where people aren't going to get along. And that's going to tempt people to have, people talk about church burnout or church hurt and all that kind of stuff. And I get that. I don't mean to be callous about it. I totally understand that. But that's stuff that we do to ourselves. So this is what he says in the 4th chapter, right before he gets to the rejoice in the Lord. He said, I plead with Euodia and I plead with Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord. And I ask you, my true companion, to help these women, since they've contended at my side in the cause of the gospel along with Clement and the rest of the co-workers whose names are in the book of life. He says these two women, they happen to be women. That's not the point. These two leaders, they're actual leaders in the church, right? He's using their names. He is saying that they've labored with me. They've been with all of us. These are high-level leaders in the church, and they're not getting along. And he realizes that can create its own challenges for us. It can create that just one little thing, one little thing, and it's not just about them, it's about the consequences that come into all of that. All of these are things that can cause us to crawl into our cage. And Paul wants us to stop and pause and first off consider that happens. You remember David Brooks? He's not remember him, he's here alive now, not here, but alive. But David Brooks has become famous in the last few years by talking about two different kinds of virtues. You've heard me mention this before. So Brooks says that there are really two kinds of virtues as we live our life. The first are resume virtues. The things that you would put on your resume, the things that you would be noted for, like the schools you attended, or the jobs that you've had, or the things that you've accomplished in your life, or the things that you would put on a resume. Those kinds of virtues. And then he says they're eulogy virtues. The things that not you're going to put on your resume, but the things at the end of the day that are going to be said about you. The eulogy. What's going to be said about you. And he says that we live in our lives in this way where we're writing both. And they both have value, right? It's a good thing for us to succeed in life. It's a good thing for us to study hard and go to good schools. And it's a good thing for us to accomplish something. And it's a good thing for us those are good things. It's a good thing for us to be able to be successful in business or in teaching, whatever it may be. But I've done hundreds of funerals, hundreds. And I've had hundreds of people get up and speak about their father or their mother. And I will tell you what, never once has anyone gotten up and said, the thing I admired most about my dad was that he worked till 8 o'clock every night and came home tired. But what I have heard, my mom was always there for me. She knew what mattered. She knew which bruise to bandage, whether it be on my body or in my heart or on my mind. We write both every day. And here's what Paul's saying. Here's what my Uncle Albert is saying. Is that same as David Brooks. Those kinds of things that are written slowly but surely. But they're all in our handwriting. And in all of this, what Paul recognizes, I think, when you read the corpus of Paul recognizes this. He recognizes that the adversary, whether we call it the devil or Satan, whatever words we want to use, but the adversary always works by keeping us off balance. The adversary doesn't come in and give you this great temptation and say, hey, you choose this, and we don't choose bad stuff, right? I mean, we don't choose to be bad people. We don't, we become that because of the other choices we make, because we think we're getting something good out of it. And it's always like the adversary just wants to keep you off balance, just wants to keep you a little confused. I think this is why Paul uses so much boxing analogies. Because if you think about boxing works with one dominant theme. Really, when you look at it, it's not the knockout punch. It's always the jabs. It's the jabs and the jabs and the jabs, and the jabs are what throw you off. It's about jabs that keep you off balance. It's the jabs that trick you into thinking something's coming from this direction until it comes from this one. Or to keep you moving back and forth so that you can't focus, or to be jabbing at you so much that you can't have an opportunity for you to put any offense in. All of those kinds of things. I think that's why Paul uses that analogy so much. Because Paul says this over and over. It's these small little things. It's the subtle little things that lead us astray. It's not like we sit down and say, oh, Satan and God. Yeah, I'm going to pick Satan. Like, nobody does that. But what we do is we just do something slowly. Oh, I still love God. I still love him. And then we find ourselves somewhere where we're locked in. This is how it works. So what do? Right? I said, Jim can get all this going. What do? Well, I think you stick with the boxing analogy you start with. You stay on your toes. I think you realize that it's going to be the small stuff that matters. There's a lot of writing that says, don't sweat the small stuff, and I get that in that context, but there's sometimes you really should sweat the small stuff. The little choices you make, the small little things you make, the way you respond to someone, what you say, those things are going to be there. Our 4 and 6-year-old grandkids were with us for 5 or 6 weeks. And the last day, yesterday, I got this thing going with them where I want them to say, I keep saying, you're in the South now, so I want you to say, yes, ma'am, and yes, sir, and all. And so we got this little thing going so that if you say, yeah, you get your nose and your ear plucked. And I say, yeah, a lot, and they call it out, and they pluck my nose and ear a lot harder than I pluck theirs, right? So it's going. So yesterday, our 4-year-old Silas, we're up in the bed having yogurt and berries, door closed, sneaking in a cartoon or something. And I thought he said, yeah. And I said, oh, you said yeah. And I went over and plucked him. And he got furious at me. He's irate. He's like, I did not say yeah. I said yes. And I said, okay. So I'd already plucked him and all. And he was just like, he was fit to be tied. And so then he finally calmed down, and we was watching, and I went out and I did something, and I came back 30 minutes later, maybe longer than that. It may have been an hour later. And I went up to him, and the first thing he said to me, he says, I said yes. I mean, that was still in his head, right? Now, here's the thing, is that it's the small stuff. What I misspoke, if I don't find a way to come back and apologize or to use that as something, you see, are we together? How it's all these things they don't seem like big things, but they ultimately are. So how do you stay on your toes? Paul says it. Whatever is true, whatever is noble, whatever is pure, whatever is lovely, whatever is admirable, if anything's excellent or praiseworthy, think about such things. Keep your mind on something that is true, noble, pure, lovely, admirable, excellent, praiseworthy. Don't let your mind get off balance. So keep your mind on what is good. What do you see that is good and true and noble? My first church, I had two people in the church that they were actually related to each other. It was a little farming community, and they brought their fight to the church every Sunday. And it just got harder and harder, and people were divided, like who's, where you sat and all that kind of stuff. So I'd read something, and I'm a young new pastor. I'm like, I can fix this. They've been fighting for 68 years, I think, but I can fix this. So I brought them in. Like, you see the arrogance even in that. I brought them in. I sat behind my desk, put them in the two over there, and I said to them, okay, I says, we're not leaving here until we get this worked out. And they looked at me like, you have no idea. And so actually, this is what happened. I had two pads of paper and 2 pens. And I came from behind my desk, and I handed each of them a pen and a pad, and I put it down on their laps, and they're still sitting like this. And I sat back behind my desk, great relational guy that I was. And I said, okay, here's the thing. Before we do anything else, you're going to sit down and write 10 things that you admire about the other person. And they looked at me like, what? And I said, no, you're going to write 10 things that you see. There's something you can see that's good in the other person. I just want you to write 10 simple things. What? And they sat there. And they went, and one of them would take the pen like she was going to write something, and then say, and the other one would like this thing went on. So then I finally I conceded. I said, okay, we don't have a lot of time. Let's just do 5 things. And so I said, okay, 5 things. Couldn't get anything. And I said, we're not leaving here. I did have enough authority for that from them. Like, we're not leaving here till you come up with 5 things, 5 good things about the other person. So I sat them down. So I finally went back, and I pulled the pad out, and I had a divine inspiration. I really do think it was a divine inspiration. I pulled the pad, and I looked at what she had written, and she said, she's not as mean as she used to be. She's uglier than she was, but that's not her fault. It was that kind of stuff. I'm not joking. It was just that kind of stuff. And I'm like, okay, so I pick it up, and the Lord spoke to me. And I just read those 5 things to the person that she had written them about. And I said, Edith says that you have a really big heart, and that everybody loves your apple pie, and everybody in the family talks about being loved when they get it. And I came up with and then I said, okay, now let me come over and read what you've got. And she's like, hit it, tearing it up. And she's starting to stick it in her mouth like she did not want. Here's my point. It's just the point is this, is that, it's so easy to focus on what we're mad about and what's wrong. And here's the truth. Is there anybody in your life, don't put your hand up. Is there anybody in your life you don't like, right? Is there anybody seated next to you? No. That you don't like? So here's the deal. And you just be honest with yourself. If you don't like them, no matter what they do, it validates that you don't like them. He's the most arrogant guy. He wants everybody to know what he's done, what he's accomplished. He wants to talk about himself all the time. It's all about him. And then one day you come in and you realize he's in the soup kitchen, and he knows all the folks experiencing homelessness by name, and he obviously has some connection with them. They know him and they trust him, and he sits down and he eats with them, and then you're like, yeah, look how arrogant he is. He's doing that because he's covering up for all the other stuff of how bad he is. Once we decide, we've decided. And sometimes it takes us a while, but once we decide, we've decided. And here's the great challenge for us in our life is, how do you live your life where you don't make that decision? How is it that you can do it? How is it that you can live your life, as Paul would say, whatever is lovely, whatever is pure, whatever is noble, whatever is true, whatever is admirable, whatever is excellent or praiseworthy? Think about such things. How can we take our notes and take the people that irritate us the most or whatever, and we find something of good in them, something of hope in them, something of promise in them? This is what they start to become, is what we see in them. So that's a key. But here's a really big one, even bigger than that. Here's the big one. It's not simply whatever is true or noble or pure or lovely, but rejoice in the Lord always. Again, I will say it, rejoice. There's something about gratitude. There's something about being able to rejoice. There's something about, no matter the circumstances. Hunter did a good job with this, with the kids, talking about the difference between happy and joy. There's something about being confident in knowing who I am and whose I am, and being able to rejoice in the Lord no matter what the circumstances. That same church, little country church that I served, my first call, I would leave the sanctuary. I was there by myself, and I was the whole staff. And I'd leave the sanctuary door open a lot. And one day I heard something going on over there, this like shouting and all. And I went over and I went into the sanctuary, and it was a young woman that was in there who's a member of our church. And she wasn't shouting, she was praising. And she was just going on and on about, Lord, I thank you this, and I thank you for this. And she went through all these things for which she was grateful. And Lord, I thank you for your goodness, and your goodness never fails. And she had all the scripture that was imbued in it that she just knew, and it was part of her, and all that was going on. And I sat down in amazement. And she went on for an hour. And just an amazement and this gratitude and this gratitude and this gratitude. And finally she was done, and she starts to walk out, and she was shocked to see me. And I said to her, that's one of the I've never seen anything so beautiful in my life. And she said, thank you. So all she said was, thank you. I'm so grateful. Her husband called me that night to let me know that she'd been at the doctor's office and had been diagnosed with stage 4 cancer in her late 20s. And on the way home, she stopped by the church before she came to tell him and her family. People are not just like that. We become that by choosing to rejoice no matter what. By choosing not simply to have this fake kind of thought, but to truly know that the world and all that is in it is the Lord's, and that Jesus is Lord, and that he has promised. He has made promises to us. He had made promise to my young friend. He's made a promise to you. He's made a promise to me of life and life eternal. And in all of that, there is this great, great, great privilege of rejoicing. I think about that forlorn feline and my Uncle Albert a lot. I've come to realize they really had a lot more in common than I thought. Unhappy the tiger. And my Uncle Albert lost his wife when his kids were little. He lost his daughter about a year suddenly after his wife died. He drove a taxi cab. He could barely pay his bills. I think I just realized a few years ago, I'm not sure my Uncle Albert knew how to read. I say that because I'd come by his house every morning on the way to school, and he'd be sitting on the porch. He got the newspaper delivered, the State. And he'd be sitting there and he'd say, Jimmy, my eyes are kind of tired today. Would you mind reading the paper to me? But of all the people I've ever known in my life, his laugh is the one that still brings me the most joy. Never once did I hear a bad word or an ill thought or an angry response. For some reason, he was one who never would put a foot in the cage. So I don't know about you, my friends. I don't know what cage is there for you. I got a feeling you do. What temptation might be there, the small little thing. Maybe it's wrapped in something really good. Maybe it's wrapped in a resentment. You know, the truth is, it doesn't really matter. Either way, it takes you in. Step out. Let's be a people today who say, rejoice in the Lord always. We say it again. Rejoice. I think there's something in there. I hope, at least. Amen.